Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm Jim Egan, head of school here at Synapse School. And I really appreciate you coming out. I know the weather looks ominous, right, Jean-Claude? But I don't know. So this is the first installment of our Bold Ideas speaker series. And I have the great pleasure of talking with members of our community, of our parent community, who do extraordinary things. And so tonight we have this wonderful guest. I'm going to jump right into Jean-Claude's background. I'm going to read a little welcome, Jean-Claude. So I'm going to sing your praises. All right? Because there's lots to praise. So Jean-Claude Rizard is a distinguished, and by the way, you can tell if this is wrong, some of this is from...
Distinguished already is
distinguished educator and leader in the field of education, reform, born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Is that true?
No.
See?
That's Wikipedia is wrong, but
Were you born in Haiti?
I was born in Haiti.
Yeah,
So Cap Haitian.
Got it. Okay.
Yes.
And you immigrated to the United States in 76?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, we're good. 2 for 3. And that was to come back to family, if I remember correctly, right? You had family in New York.
No, actually, my parents, I use the expression, escaped from Haiti because of a despot in 1970. We were reunited in 1976 as a family.
Okay. Let's keep going. Attended public schools in Brooklyn.
Yes.
Earned a bachelor's degree in chemistry.
Yes.
Right? And a master's degree in science education.
Yes.
From Queens College.
Queens College.
Right on. As well as a master's degree in school administration and supervision from City College.
Yes.
In New York. And you began your career as a teacher at Rikers Island.
Yes.
Is that correct? We got to get back to that.
Yes.
Teachers, if you don't know, Synapse teachers don't know Rikers Island. What is Rikers Island?
It's a prison in Queens, New York that mostly houses, temporarily houses adults and young like teenagers. It basically is a holding pen. If you're sentenced for a year or less or waiting trial, is a place to go. It's notorious for being not good to people.
So teachers, sometimes the behaviors gives just you're not at Rikers.
Yes.
Right. I'll tell you, right? But you later moved to George Westinghouse Career in Technical Education High School, where you taught physics. You became principal in 1999.
Yes.
2003, you rose to instructional superintendent, right? Region 8 within New York City's Department of Education. That's a big deal. And in 2008, also you then left and went and became superintendent at Rochester City School District.
Yeah, there was a few things in New York. One I'm proud of, I led the high school division in New York, and I tell people that's 400 high schools that I was managing in New York City. Probably the most stressful job I've ever had in my career.
I imagine, yeah. Right. So in 2011, you were appointed Chief Executive Officer of Chicago Public Schools.
Yes.
That's the third largest school district in the United States.
Was,
right. During your tenure, you focused on implementing educational reforms aimed at improving student outcomes. Then after that, you served as a senior advisor and deputy director in U.S. programs at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And then 2021, you became the president and CEO of Digital Promise. We'll talk more about that. A nonpartisan nonprofit organization focused on accelerating innovation in education to improve opportunities for all learners. Your impressive career is characterized by your commitment to educational equity and reform. Your leadership roles across various educational settings demonstrate your dedication to improving educational outcomes for students, particularly those from underserved communities. Your work continues to influence educational practices and policies around the world aimed at fostering innovation and equity in education. And you are also a parent of an alum, Silas, right? He's a freshman. Where is he a freshman?
Archbishop Mitty.
Right, yep. Just made the freshman basketball team.
Yes, he did. That's right.
And you are also a parent of 2 current Synapse kids, right? Remy, right, and Emil. And your impressiveness is also amplified by your wife, Brooke, and she's not here, right?
She's in Boston, yeah.
She's another top-flight educator and reformer who I interviewed in a previous Bold Ideas event. So you're not the only big shot.
No. I followed a whole year later.
All right, she'd have to go first.
Yes.
All right. But
twice, by the way, twice. But she also moderated Todd Rose.
Oh, yeah.
You may remember that, the end of average.
You got to eventually.
Yes.
But you're also a former neighbor of mine.
Yes.
And a dear friend. So I'm super happy you're here this evening. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Clap it up.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So the goal tonight is around 60 minutes. This is for the audience. And we're going to have a meaningful conversation that hopefully keeps you entertained, as well as thinking about education, about kids, about your kids, about schools, teaching and learning. And we'll have you participate at the end if you have questions. So along the way, think think about what we're talking about, and then you can ask this question. So let's get right to the most important questions first, right? So I grew up in the New York metro area too, in the 80s. So you have to be decisive. Yankees or Mets?
Oh, Mets.
But you got that one right.
So Brooke is a Red Sox fan. I could never be a Yankee fan.
Right. Mets, Giants, Jets.
Giants.
Okay. We're on teams still.
Yes.
And then most importantly, Knicks, Nets.
Neither one.
No. Really?
So I've never seen the Nets play. I've seen the Knicks play. I was never a basketball fan.
You're like 6
because
foot.
that's exactly it. When you're tall and you're black, everyone expects you to play basketball. I grew up playing soccer, to be frank.
That's right.
I never heard of basketball till I came here when I was
You're
11, 12. But now I'm basketball because my son plays basketball.
It's like incredibly into it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. You're 2 for 3. That's good. So Frank, let's get to you. Personal journey. Let's think about like your own experiences. How has your personal experience as a student or a teacher or a leader in education shaped your perspective on innovation? Like, what was your first experiences as a student or even as a teacher? How has that shaped? Because I know you're really thinking about innovation.
Yeah.
What in your background has shaped that?
Wow. I mean, it's a big question. So perhaps my first experience in chemistry as a student, maybe in college, doing laboratories, and don't know my sound. I'll use my teacher voice. But when I discovered the power of technology in my chemistry courses, classes I was taking, it changed the way I looked at the work. For example, if you remember your high school science classrooms, your laboratories, they were all cookbook labs, right? You follow procedure, and at the end, you're asked to describe what you did and what you learned. Of course, you have no idea what happened, right? Thank you. Perfect. Thank you. What I discovered with leveraging technology was that you can actually flip the script and spend a little bit of time on the experimentation, a lot of time on the conversation and discussion and the analysis. That changed for me how I looked at science, and frankly led to the way I taught physics as well too. I taught in a high school in Brooklyn, New York, that was nicknamed Hip Hop High because Jay-Z, Busta Rhymes, Lil Kim, all these rap artists went to that school. I didn't know that when I became principal until MTV called and asked for a copy of Jay-Z's transcript, Sean Carter.
I literally had a question. I didn't get to it, but I was like going to say Jay-Z or not.
Yes.
Is it Jay-Z?
I hate Jay-Z, but I can explain why as well too. But that for me was transformative both as a teacher, principal, and as a student. And I'll give you one more perhaps where I discovered that kind of work, which is not perhaps in my bio. I'm a commercial pilot, and watching machine learning in what I fly. When I moved from the steam gauges to flying a Cirrus, an SR-22 perspective, which is all is AI machine learning, the damn thing in itself, and I begin to really understand the power, frankly, that technology can have in really transforming what we do. And that has permeated even my discussions now in the work that I do at Digital Promise.
Yeah, that's great. We'll get the mics fixed and then my mic's out too, or we'll share a mic. But like the definition of innovation, because that's often that it's thrown around, that word, right? I mean, how do you define it in education, particularly for students, like the Synapse age, right? Because we have some parents and teachers here, and obviously prospective parents. So ages 4 to 14, how should educators define innovation?
Yeah, I was at Google all day yesterday, and I was on stage and asked that question: will emerging technologies change the way we learn or not? And the answer was very simple. The way people learn really will not change. Perhaps the way we process information will maybe morph. But learning science is learning science, and what technology will do perhaps is enable certain kinds of things, right? So when you think about the challenges we've had in understanding how kids learn, especially perhaps in the more lower resource communities, there are some fundamental challenges, both in terms of neurodiversity, that we have dyslexia, you name it, right? Or kids who have special needs, including kids who are poor, perhaps have not learned. We see that the technology, frankly, will radically help us move that if we do it really well. I think it's a big part of, thank you.
Nice.
Thank you. That for me is the way I think about innovation, which is how do we take existing challenges in education, things we've struggled with for so many decades, and actually make progress during in shifting that. Let me give you perhaps one concrete example that was part of the Todd Rose discussion that Brooke.
Who is Todd Rose? Explain.
So
Yes.
So he wrote a book called The End of Average. He was a Harvard professor in a center at Harvard. Now he's independent, doing a lot of his work. He's written several books since, but his book, The End of Average, is my favorite, which describes the fact that every single person has a jagged learner profile. There is no such thing as the average human being or the average learner. Yet everything in education is built around the average learner. From your 3-hour test to, if you know, your high school, your 45-minute periods, all that stuff, even the 180-day school year, beyond the fact that we know much of it is around the farming and the agrarian culture. But we build our school system around efficiency. So Todd Rose tried to debunk all of that. So you've heard the expression, how do you personalize education? And the thing we push is, it's not just personalization, but how do you think about this jagged learner profile, this unique profile that we all have? How do you actually get personal with young people around that? So one of the things we've developed as an organization is this thing called Learner Variability Navigator, the LVN. Vic Vilcek used to be a parent here, now his kids are in high school, used to work for our organization, helped develop this platform with Todd Rose. So what we're doing now is basically taking the learning science, leveraging technology to really help teachers get personal and really understand what is driving some of the behaviors and some of the learning things that we know in education. We even have a company now designing lessons in units of study for teachers. So Todd laid the foundation, and we're taking it to the nth degree. The whole thing was funded by the Oak Foundation there in Geneva, initially built for special needs kids, but to support developers, technologists, to build tools for special needs kids. Lo and behold, it works for everybody. So that whole platform now, we think, will solve a fundamental challenge in education, and ultimately, frankly, will change the way we assess learning. And for me, that is the obsession I have right now, building next generation assessments.
Yeah, let's even jump to that, because that was further down on my list. But we've talked a bit about assessment. I heard you speak at Carnegie, right, where your wife works. She got the space. Did I just know that?
Yes, I did.
And it was this amazing event that I was lucky to be invited to. But you spoke about this sort of great unlock that AI will have around assessment. And you, if I get it right, you were saying it'll make assessment like less an event.
Yes.
Right? Is that what? And I've even stole that line and used it at tours.
Awesome.
But explain that. What do you mean?
Well, absolutely. In fact, I just met with the Christensen family, the owners of the Lego group. They were looking to invest in American education. That was my pitch to them. Focus on that. Right now, when you think about assessment, first of all, when you look at the traditional assessments, the summative assessments, the PARCC assessments, for example, we say they're made to be equally boring, so no one has an advantage, right? It doesn't really measure learning, right? You may have missed certain amount of schools. Vic actually did this, where he tested his son using fishing as the through line. Vic has now he's 12, I think.
Alex, he's almost as tall as you.
Yes, who was obsessed with fishing. This young boy. His Lexile scores jumped because the thing was about fishing. You think as an adult, I'm going to test you on something you don't care about, you're not going to do very well. So the idea is, frankly, to think about assessment not being a thing, an event, a time and place where you sit and take a bubble sheet test, but for it to be embedded in the activity, in the pedagogy. The best example I can give is most reading teachers will sit next to a child, and as they read, taking notes. We call it a running record. That is time consuming. It is arduous. But you think about that automated in a way that really allows for the machine to be working with a child and collecting information and feeding the teacher. Then they know how to actually intervene and support this child. So a sensors in the activity, in the pedagogy, right? That is transparent to the user, but at the same time, sort of tacitly implemented, right? It no longer is a thing, but something we're actually collecting on a regular basis. Will also allow for us to collect non-academic competencies, right? And one thing we know, especially being at Synapse, is that the non-academic is what really begets success in life. And we know now through the learning sciences that the non-academic actually supports the academic. Executive function, book will tell you, is not a social emotional skill, it's an academic skill. And all of us in work, we know how important that skill is, and it's multidimensional as well. So I'm excited about what could be in this next gen assessment work.
Do you think, I've like, Apple Watch going, and I've got an Oura Ring, and I'm constantly collecting data, right? My health, right? My cardiovascular health, my sleep, my heart rate, I've got just so much data.
Yes.
I mean, that might be extreme. I don't know. But I use it all the time, right? As an aging athlete, but I'm constantly using it to sort of get barometers and like see where I am and see where my VO2 max is going. How do I get it higher?
Yeah.
I mean, are we heading in that direction with some of the tools? Have you seen anything like that in terms of assessment? Is it going to be more continual instead of having it 3 times a year? We have finals every trimester, or even here, right? We have MAP testing, which is great, but it's adaptive, but it's 3 times a year.
No, it's already moving. In fact, I was talking to Saul Khan Academy, and he just got a ton of money from Reed Hastings to begin to study this idea of next-gen assessments. So even the Netflix guys are getting into this display. So yesterday at Google, the moderator asked me, is it like cooking? When you're cooking, you're adding salt, you're adding pepper, you're tasting it, and you're like this formative way of making sure the meal is coming up. That's exactly right. How you make that happen in education, in the classroom, that is a challenge for us. But we have to build the tools.
Yeah, so the tools are coming, or they're there.
Yes.
How do you implement them?
Absolutely.
Right. Any TV shows, there's teachers here like managing the classroom, manage the behaviors. And
can I give you one? Go back to the fishing piece. Bob Schwartz, the dean of the School of Ed at Stanford, has worked on this idea of context-based assessment. Scaling it is a challenge, of course, right? But the idea that assessment can be contextual is something else that even the School of Ed at Stanford is looking at as well too. So I'm excited about what could be coming. And I think will ultimately change how we teach,
right,
and how we learn.
So with that in mind, like things are coming. It's hard to like timeline on it, but so I won't even ask that. But at what do we need teachers to be focusing on as they're training, right? Even like we have associate teacher program, other schools of education, or like what should be first and foremost for those teachers?
Let me say first of all, I think a lot of the onus is on us, right? As system leaders, school leaders, to make sure that teachers have the tools they need to be successful. But to your question, what I often tell teachers is play with it. So we're having a conference in Anaheim, California at the end of February, and we have Google coming with a full room on Gemini for folks to play. So 800 teachers and principals, that's all we're inviting to come and play with AI. We even have Lego coming in to look at playful learning and artificial intelligence and how you play with that. So we tell teachers play, learn, understand, but I think it's really incumbent on the leaders and developers to build the tools that teachers need, but to do so in what we call the golden triangle. And let me qualify that. We shouldn't be building tools in a corner and bringing it to the classroom. It should be done by centering the practitioner as a co-designer. So the announcement we made at Google yesterday was we're going to take a bunch of school districts, right, and teachers and principals, developers at Google, and our learning science team are going to work together in developing guidance and tools for the sector. We just launched a project with the Institute for Education Sciences, IES, part of the U.S. government, on the science of reading and AI with 6 school districts, 5 in Pennsylvania and Washington, D.C. public schools, looking at how do you integrate AI into the science of reading, but to do so with people who are using mirror learning as a platform, for example. That kind of a golden triangle is how you actually build things.
So it's similar to like some of the parents here are guests. Like we have a BLC, the similar model, right? We bring the Learning Center at Stanford. Stanford Synapse partnership brings the researchers in with the teachers and co-designs the research project to try to implement what we know. We don't treat the researchers aren't treated the teachers as separate. They're included. It's co-creation.
The team actually did a lunch and learn for my staff last spring because what happens here at the BLC is very much aligned to the way we actually work at Digital Promise. So people were ecstatic to see that this is actually happening outside of digital primary. Silas, who was part of the BLC last year, was too afraid. He was too shy to actually participate as a student. But the bottom line was people seeing that kind of research to practice in action. But in this case, we have students who are part of the development as well too.
Yeah, I mean, again, if people don't know, like we have this very unique partnership, and we're presenting all over the place. Like Liz Tamarian, the director of the BLC, told me today she was asked to be a speaker. I don't know if Liz is here tonight, but with Denise Clark Pope, if you know who she is. She was just like, I'm not of her caliber, and I was like, "Get you artists, what are you doing? Get on the stage, do that, go do that thing." But I think it's such a novel partnership that we have. I wonder when it will be replicated more. I know it's really hard to do, as we did it here.
Yes,
but I think that could be transformative for kids elsewhere.
Well, absolutely. My board chair, who used to be the head of people for Boeing, had 1,000 questions about the BLC. He goes, "Where can we take this to the other systems around the country?"
Yeah, we have visitors from around the world. We have a group from Brazil, and they were just like, "Oh my gosh, it's like it's awesome." All right, what about teaching and learning? Right, we have a lot of parents here with young kids. How do you think we should design systems? You think, as you're at systems level, to nurture curiosity and creativity, from an early age. I know how to do it as a school leader, an independent school leader, but like, can systems do that?
Yeah, if you have what I describe as strategic agility, meaning that you think about it here at the macro level, but it's got to show up in the classroom. Let me just say that kids are naturally curious. Right. We have a habit of killing the curiosity in them as they get older. I tell the story of my daughter who's now 23 years old. When she was 2 or 3, she could sit and stare at an earthworm for hours. Yet, by the time she was in middle school, she could care less about the earthworm that she was looking at. So the idea of making sure that we nurture that curiosity, I think, is the work. Is one of the reasons, frankly, we came to a place like Synapse, right? Because you can see it continue. Remy, who's 9, not this portfolio day, but last spring, with I think Macy was still his teacher then. To see the teacher engage this 8-year-old in conversation, it was like, oh my God! I was on the sideline just watching and listening. She completely ignored me, but the way she engaged them was like, that's the way in which you teach. So you think about the way you design lessons. That's critical. The way you design units, but to make sure that the student, the agency of the child or the learner is a part of that. And they could be 2 years old, 4 years old, 14 years old, to make sure you nurture that engagement in conversation. When I taught, for example, I taught physics at the high school level as seniors, right? In every unit with the Socratic circle about a very important topic, physics, right? One was very controversial. Should you get more votes the richer you are?
Oh, really?
Right? And they engage fully in conversation. And I would bring different topics like that, in different topics of physics or mathematics, just to show the beauty of the physical sciences. By the way, a lot of my kids now are engineers. One is a professor of physics in New York at SUNY Albany. So that for me was the way in which you nurture that, by having discussions and conversation and building the agency in the learning.
Because I think we do the similar things here. It sounds like you did it even in your class, but it's not very efficient, right? I mean, it takes patience. I know little kids, right? There was even a parent telling me about her earlier before we started, about her child at a preschool who will get really focused on the task, and some of the teachers say, "Hey, we got to move you off the task," right? Like your daughter, I need to stop looking at the earthworm
and move on.
And we do an amazing job most of the time that here at Synapse, but that I can only imagine what it's like if you've got hundreds of kids, thousands of kids. You got to push them through a system. There may be that 1 or 2 teachers, maybe it was you, maybe it was me back in the day, who allowed for it. But how do you incentivize that? What should the system do?
I mean, I think part of it is, I've been in systems on the morning in Southern California, where my mentor actually worked, was Garden Grove, California. Loved the superintendent when I was studying to be a superintendent. But the one thing I did not like about her system was that her chief academic officer could walk into any classrooms and tell me where the teacher was in the pacing guide. That always worried me, because whether you get or not, we're going to move on to the next thing, right? Life does not work like that,
It's
frankly.
like AP teachers, like for my son when he was
Absolutely.
and he was like, let's go.
And this is where the testing regimen does that to schools. Look, NCLB did a lot of good things for education, a lot of bad things for education. Math and reading proficiency became the goal
Right.
in most places, not about someone's lifelong learning, happiness, curiosity, which actually begets success, right?
Right.
So it goes back to the ways in which we assess. It goes back to the kind of ways we actually write curriculum that forces a level of rigidity in the system, right? So Book have said this on stage. The battle in structuring the American education system was between John Dewey and Ed Thorndike, right? Thorndike won. It was all about efficiency. It became a factory model. It became the assembly line of moving kids through and through. I have a data. I did a keynote last week in Houston for Ed Spaces. This was 1,200 architects, school designers, not academic school designers. These are physical building people, right? And we talked about the connection between learning science, neuroscience, and facilities. And I have a few pictures comparing buildings. I have a full presentation, but I can show you, where I've had architects guess jail or school, and they're wrong half the time. So the question is, do you want to build buildings for compliance and for or buildings for curiosity in case you actually play? One of my guests was the school superintendent for Compton Unified, where Dr. Dre went to school. He's completely redesigned the high school, and we did a fly-through of the high school, and folks were like, "Oh my God, look at this space!" But you can tell it was designed for engagement, persistence, motivation, curiosity, right? And that's the work we have to do in education because, and I've tested this. EL Education, I'm on the board of EL Education. They're East Coast-based outfit. They have schools all across the East Coast. Their curricula on ELA is across the country, right? Camille Farrington from U Chicago writes their crew. There's so much alignment, by the way, between EL and Synapse. The whole crew curricula would remind you of what you see in the engineering center. I still want to call it, makerspace. It's okay. But when you see those schools, you see HSC, and you remove all that work and you see the outcome. So my point very simply is that the only blue ribbon school I had in Rochester where I was superintendent was an EL school. They never obsess over the assessment. They built an organic place that fostered creativity, and they were 94, 95 percentile in proficiency. They beat every school in the system. So if you do it right, you're going to get the outcomes you're looking for. Yeah. But when you have a rigid leader who's trying to push that on a system, then you kill the creativity in school.
It's funny you mentioned the architects of these buildings. Just yesterday, we had I don't know if I told you this, we had a staff meeting where I shared a TED Talk on a kindergarten in Japan that was circular design. It's really interesting and sort of awe-inspiring design of a building for kids, right? But it's super radical. And if you hear him talking about it, it's also makes perfect sense. So it's rounded design, and like the kids there's like no doors, and they will leave. The kindergartners just run out, and if people will ask him like, what happens to the kids? And he's like, well, they get anxious when they're 5 and 6, so they don't know how to talk about it, so they just run. But it's circular, so they got to come back. They eventually come back.
Yes.
Right? They're like, oh, wow, it's designed for a 5-year-old.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that 5-year-old needs that ability to go, just come back.
Yes.
And they're still 5, so you don't want them to get lost, so it's circular.
I can give you 2 quick examples. There's a school in Arlington, Virginia, which was part of my discussion last week, where every classroom leads to a playground.
Right.
Out every single classroom, no stairs, it's all tubes. Kids are flying down from different floors. The power went out for 2 hours. No one knew because the natural light in that building was so fantastic. Yeah. But one school I was at last spring in Pittsburgh Metro, an elementary school, and I showed the picture last week and I asked, can you tell what's different in this cafeteria? The floor where the adults stand to serve lunch sunk. So when the children go pick up their lunch, they're eye to eye with the adults. And you ask, why is that important? The architects had no idea what they were doing, but it's important because it fosters a sense of belonging. Yeah. These young people feel I can talk to you which is why teachers get on the floor,
Right.
on the carpet, and sit next to kids
Yeah.
and talk to them eye to eye.
Right. Yeah. If you witness good teachers, they spend a lot of time on the ground.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. You mentioned what's going on at Google, but why don't you explain that a little more? That was this big announcement yesterday, or what? It's exciting. Talk about it.
Yes. So we've done work with Google before, and we're maybe doing some work with OpenAI, which I can talk about as well too. We're still in the discussion stages. But this announcement yesterday was really taking their Notebook LM, the Gemini work, and they actually have a smallish learning science team. And so we're going to work hand in glove in developing guidance for developers and for leaders. One of the things that we worry about a lot is that we spend $87 billion in ed tech, education technology in the US alone.
87 billion.
Billion with a B. Most school systems have made 2,000 or 3,000 ed tech products in their school systems, yet very few have a plan for how to integrate technology into the classroom work. So what we're going to be doing is building that and informing the work we initially going to start with 160 superintendents, but the goal is to permeate to 14,000 superintendents. So how do we really get to the place where they have a plan for technology, and the technology really responds to the needs of children and learners? So teaching and learning is going to be front and center in that work. I'm not sure we'll get to assessment, but certainly how do we transform that? Let me give you perhaps one example of the kind of work that I'm excited about with this announcement and we're going to be doing next year. I saw a presentation from ASU last spring in Salt Lake City. It was a CIO from ASU who said to ask the audience, when you think about the American Revolutionary War, what do you think about? And he goes, let me guess. Picture. I'll give you a guess. George Washington, right? Thomas Jefferson. And he said,
White guys.
He goes, all white men who could afford to have their portraits painted. Using Gen AI, he goes, let me show you who the real heroes are of the American Revolutionary War. You'll begin to go to this gallery of people, like, oh my God. I mean, as educated as we were in that audience, we knew that, but the whole mental model shifted about how to teach history. So for us, that can show up in so many different subject areas. And one example I use with people is, if you're old enough to remember the Magic School Bus, I said, imagine that being part of every lesson. When I taught earth science in middle school, I remember teaching plate tectonics, right? The models in your hand, you're shifting, moving things around. And these poor Latino kids in Bushwick, Brooklyn had no idea what the hell I was talking about. But imagine telling them, let's go see the St. Andreas Fault. And you take them there. And you see it in action, you talk about it, right? So that's the potential for Gen AI. And I know I'm perhaps preaching to the converted. When people think of Gen AI, they think of generative text,
Right.
But think about images, video, right? All that can show up in the ways in which we transform how we think about teaching and learning.
In AR, VR, is that part of this, or?
It could be, right? It could be. We've had a project using VR technology with Sienna, where kids are chronicling their lives in different parts of the world. This year, we had 500 entries from Haiti to Sri Lanka to Finland. And these kids are talking to each other about, this is what my life looked like. And that kind of engagement fosters that kind of, so what's a good word? We don't become maybe a US first country, that we see the world as being one. We see our shared humanity. So you think about how that helps transform someone's worldview, right? For me, that's the kind of fun stuff we can do in teaching and learning that will transform quickly how we teach kids.
So staying on technology for just a little bit more, there's a lot of stuff coming, right? And it's going to be integrated into classrooms. But even at Synapse, right, where teachers are self-selecting into a school to take risks, to play with tools, do all this stuff, it can be difficult for them to all adopt it because there are other needs, right? They could be, teaching kids how to be good friends. It could be working on literacy skills and math skills. I mean, how do you do it in a way that doesn't overwhelm a teacher or even a building or a district? Is there a way to do it? Have you seen it done?
Well, I mean, it's starting to happen. I think it goes back to the professional learning and support you provide to a teacher. Part of the challenge, of course, is that now these schools tools are great. Everybody now says, I have AI in my ed tech product, but some of it is awful, right? And sometimes the machine hallucinates, right? And we don't know. Sometimes you get garbage data. I'll give you an example. There's people hallucinate too. Or that's true. I mean, we had a product I was playing with and we're supporting the founder last year, and we asked the LLM to design a project-based learning lesson for dyslexic kids, right? The project-based program was actually pretty good. The science around dyslexia was crap. Excuse my language, was awful. But unless you understood that, you would not know that. So we have to have a level of vetting that we have to support, because not every teacher will know how to do this. So one of the things that we care about is beyond safety and privacy, which we're pushing. By the way, everything coming out of the feds on AI and guidance, we're writing for the federal government. Like I was saying that publicly, but
is that right?
Yeah, actually, right. Even the Biden's executive order, we had a hand in actually crafting. So we are working on that. And when we first met with the DOE, there were more lawyers in the room than technologists. We said, that's great, but let's talk about the safety, put that aside. Where's the innovation? What are the possibilities? Is a big part of the work we're pushing to make sure teachers have really good tools and solutions they can use. This conference in Anaheim, for example, is all about play, meaning having folks play with different tools and solutions that's been vetted. We also have a few of us in this space. If you know ISTE, it's a large nonprofit.
We've been to their conference.
Yes, it's going to be in New Orleans this year. So Richard and I talk all of the time. So there's a bunch of us who are in this space. We're beginning to curate certifications for EdTech products. It already exists. It's called the EdSurge Product Index. And before you buy something, go on there and just like type it in to see if it's good. Now we're developing an AI certification to see, is it safe? Does it protect student privacy, for example? All these things are being part of that work. So we're trying to create a filter system for teachers and principals so you don't have to guess. But it's part of this. So we're creating version 2.0 of EdSurge.
It's like ratings, or it's like
Absolutely.
common sense media or something.
Absolutely. So common sense media is part of our work as well too. But common sense is more parent focused. Right. So like I buy tools at home for the boys. Before I buy it, I go on the EdSurge Product Index. And that tells me. So even CAST, if you know CAST, ASD, they look at special needs kids. They do technology for special needs. They're part of our consortia. So we built this last year, and now we want to make sure we have a vetting. So think of consumer reports for ed technology is what we're actually trying to build.
Yeah, awesome. So last night when we were on our prep call, by the way, he complained they didn't get a prep call. Brooke got a prep call.
Yes.
I was like, all right, I'll talk to you. I'll talk to you. Give me a minute. That's okay. You mentioned CT, right?
Yes.
Which we used to have CS here. So we switched it to CT a couple of years ago, computational thinking rather than computer science. And this came up unprompted, but what were you telling me about this? I think you said it has the potential to transcend technology.
Absolutely.
Right, go ahead.
More than potential. So even in New York City, which had a huge initiative around CS for all, after 10 years of effort in the city of New York, it has not permeated the system. You still have a handful of kids getting computer science. They're shifting to CT. Doesn't mean we shouldn't teach computer science. That's all good. But my push has been teaching coding is a fool's errand because AI is already coding. The question of how do you teach a young person algorithmic thinking, pattern recognition, debugging, right? These are the skills that transcend technology, and that could apply to any subject area. So the example I was giving Jim was I was in Talladega, Alabama, rural school district, 50 miles away from Birmingham, Alabama. That's how far away they are. The CT has permeated the entire school system. I walked into a pre-K classroom where pre-Kers were building birdhouses, and they were talking about computational thinking. I saw this sign on the wall and asked, what does that mean? And his 5-year-olds explained everything to me like computational thinking. Drove across town with the superintendent to a high school honors level Shakespeare class. They were talking about CT, computational thinking. Yes, it was in math, it was in science as well too, but it was a deliberate effort in integrating all the competencies into the different subjects. You know how it was done? It was done by teachers in their units of study, our experts, over 3 years, and completely retooling every unit of study to deliberately embed those skills and competencies in that. That can compare to college and career readiness. I mean, everything we talk about frankly can show up in CTE in a way that really allows a young person to manage the machine and having the machine manage them.
Right.
So to me, that is the work ahead of us in making sure that young people know when they see a machine and know it's hallucinating, they know it's hallucinating.
Right.
You know, as a pilot, I can tell you the dashboard I have in front of me, right? I can tell you if the machine is doing something wrong, and I can intervene very quickly. And we always also espouse in this kind of work that the human needs to be in the center. Right. And the example I use has been, look at the Max 8, the Boeing Max 8. Boeing removed the pilot from the center, and we kill what? 1,000 people in the process, right? The human has to remain in the center. It's the difference between a robo vacuum and you driving an electric bike. You're in charge when you're driving the electric bike. Yes.
Oh, there's a scene where you go to Menlo Park, you go around, you see the kids on the electric bike.
Oh my God, it's everywhere.
I don't understand why parents are outraged by this.
No helmet. Even in Los Santos, no helmet.
No hands, 40 miles an hour.
Yes. And
Back and forth.
And no helmet.
Baseball practice, 3 on a bike.
Yeah, it says I've seen 3 on the bike doing that.
I mean, part of me is like, they're being rebellious. Reminds me of growing up in New York in the 80s. It's like, we're just wild. It's like, maybe it's
Wild and dumb.
yeah. Let's check a time chat. We got 10 more minutes and we'll get to some questions too. So I'll speed through. Let's talk about parents, right? Parent involvement. How can parents play a more active role in fostering some of these bold ideas we're talking about within schools, right? What could they do? Which agency do they have?
I mean, tons. I mean, think about the amount of time a child spends in school versus what they spend outside of school. I really believe that learning needs to be ubiquitous. It needs to be everywhere. How we foster that is important. I mean, look, I'm a busy traveling parent. My wife is in Boston right now, so it's hard. Sometimes we're like, oh my God, that teacher at Synapse has called 3 times. We've not responded. So we feel bad about that. But at the same time, we try to give our kids the kinds of experiences and access to things that to make sure their learning is continuous. And I do that. Silas is going to fly with me, for example, right? I mean, so he knows and sees. And even, for example, Remy was the most curious about politics in the car, asked very tough questions about Donald Trump and other people. I'm always honest. Developmentally appropriate honesty, I think is the right word. But it's the kind of experience we give our kids. The way we try to extend the learning in what they do in school is really important. It's engaging with the teacher to know, what can I do on my end to support the work you do here? The curriculum nights we have at Synapse, showing up and asking questions, for me, are the ways in which we extend that. When I see, for example, portfolio day with Emil doing work in math or physics, right? In the car, we talk about that. I mean, I taught physics. I used to have the egg dropping contest when I was a teacher, right? Yeah. Could you drop an egg from the roof of the building and not break? Whoever does that gets $50. Right. So that kind of extension and supplemental, I think, is important. Even when you travel, making sure, like, we're going to go to Costa Rica for the holidays, right?
Thanksgiving.
No, I'm talking about Christmas holidays. Silas is not off next week, so except for Thursday and Friday, so can't go anywhere. So I've already emailed a friend of mine who is the president of the University of the Earth in Costa Rica. He's part of the Aspen Institute. So we're going to go visit University of the Earth, which is a farming university, right? Silas, Emil, now Remy are going to be at the Aspen Institute with me this summer with the youth camp. They study, they do text-based conversations with kids from India, from China, from around the world. That is the 400, 500 fellows who show up every summer, and they get to participate in those conversations. So that, including summer camp, when they go in New York, to Westport, the sleepaway summer camp. First, it gives us freedom for the first time, 3.5 weeks, no kids. This summer, I thought we're going to go to Mexico City, we're going to eat Mexican food, great Mexican food. But you think about, frankly, that those kinds of experiences of extension and making sure that Macy and their teachers know what we're doing. So the extension and the connection is seamless. Yeah. Last thing very quickly, Jim, I know I have to raise. I always tell people, and I copied Richard Elmore, was the late professor at Harvard. So the most important relationship is between students, teachers, and content, except that we know really student, teachers, families, and content. that connection is what we're trying to push now, even in our technology work.
Yeah. The last one on parents, then we'll get to Q&A from our audience. What's one question you wish parents would ask more often about education?
That's a great question. It's a newish. First thing that comes to my mind is this new construct that we see now existing in education. We were just talking about this before the session. The School of Psychology and the School of Education are now talking to each other, right? Learning in BLC does that, right? So learning how the brain works and how that connects to how a child learns, and perhaps what a parent can do at home to support that. For example, if you see working memory being a challenge, sometimes sleep deprivation is what creates that, right? So those connections, if a parent understands that with a teacher, they can do the things they have to do at home to make sure that when they show up in school, they're going to learn well.
Right. After school, what will set up that individual kid for success.
Absolutely.
If the kid has this difficulty with noise, right, or the opposite, or needs to move, right, exactly.
So if you if you Google learner variability, digital promise, the whole platform is free to anyone. I was built for public consumption. Those that kind of sort of cause and effect is all on the platform. Type of question, watch the videos. Some of them, by the way, are Menlo Park public school videos that we do with Menlo Park. They're a member of our league. So take a look at that. You'll see, frankly, the ways in which learning science connects to academic learning, especially math and literacy.
Yeah, great. Hey, Sarah, can you get the lights? And then we'll ask you a couple of questions. We have a few more minutes. Since I can't see anybody.
Yes. Well, I want to give just a shout out to one of my favorite teachers here, Holly. Somebody asked me earlier how Silas did moving from Synapse to MIDI, which is a very structured, traditional high school, great sports program. I said very well, because he was taught executive function when he was out of his class. So thank you.
There you go, Holly. All right, are there any questions? Yes.
So I work in tech and I'm a designer, so I'm very excited about the GenAI use case in education. But I'm also a parent who's very concerned about screen time, and I try to keep my kids away from screen as much as I can. So I'd love to hear any exploration happening that's like making technology invisible, so kids are not just staring at the screen.
Yeah. I mean, so there is the one concrete example I can give is a new product I saw last year at ASU GSV San Diego called KIBEAM, KIBEAM. It's a science of reading technology with no screen. So the guy who invented the Leapfrog and the Scribe Pen. He's like, I build 9 companies. I don't need to make any more money, but I'm an engineer. I got to build this. It is whether we're testing it for him and doing the research behind it, but it's no screen whatsoever. And what's amazing about the tool is that it leans on the science, so it's repetitive for young people. I saw one of the books he read with me with the tool. I felt I was immersed into the book. So there was a chapter on 125th Street in Harlem, and we were transported into the book. And so I've had my kids play with it. My 9-year-old play with it. He loves it. So there are tools being developed that are screenless to reduce screen time. I also believe in everything in moderation. If you can keep them away from the screen completely, then they're going to binge. One of the things I try to do, to be fair, so I don't have to fight with my kids, we'll go take a hike. If I get them out of the house, go somewhere, they can't take a screen. That's one way of mitigating.
Another question. How about in the back?
Talk a little bit about just the federal Department of Education and from talking about
Yes.
going away. I'm curious about if you think that's real and what are some of the implications for
Yeah. It's so timely. So we're talking about that. So Digital Promise, what I lead now, came out of the US DOE. It was created by George W. Bush and then launched by Obama with Arnie Duncan when they were secretary. So we were part of ED for a long time. We do a ton of work with the agency, with the Office of Ed Tech and Ed. To unwind the DOE will take a long time if they could do it. What they could do is defund some of the things that the DOE actually administers, which will handcuff the organization, right? So one of the things that many of us are doing right now is looking for mitigation strategies. For example, some of the funding they cannot remove, so they could give the states the money. So working with the chief state school officers, the governor's offices, the CCSSOs are the better avenue for us in making sure they have capacity to do the work. You look at the state of California, for example, the state education department here in California doesn't have a ton of capacity, to be frank. The state chief is elected, which is another problem in California, frankly, right? So we work with Linda Darling-Hammond, who's the state board chair. She's much more reasonable about what needs to happen. We are right now working on a science assessment for California through LPI, her organization at Stanford, right? So we're looking at all these mitigation strategies. The second thing we're thinking about very deeply is that many of the states, even the deep red states, they care very much around economic mobility. So we have a project in Alabama. They won't talk about equity. They will not use the word equity that's in our framework, but they're working with us around economic mobility, using cybersecurity as a vehicle to stitch together systems. So we're looking for ways to do that. The last thing I'll say, which is really helpful, the HELP committee, the Senate HELP, Health, Education, Labor, Pensions, I think is the acronym what it stands for. Right? I forget. You remember that? So I met with the Senate HELP committee 2 weeks ago. I'm part of the Hoover Institution. We did a piece on Nation at Risk, very conservative part of Stanford. So we got a meeting with the minority HELP staffers who are about to become the majority come January. They're focused on school choice, but what we pushed them to think about was how do you flip the system to make schools the center of the work and make the agencies, meaning state and local agencies, a service part to support principals and teachers. That they love and bought into. How do you retool IES to provide guidance, real good scientific guidance to schools so they know what to do? So there are ways of working around some of that work. But to be frank, I don't think the president-elect is going to be able to unwind the DOE. Much of the funding come from Congress or acts of Congress. That's going to be very difficult to undo in 4 years or 8 years for that matter.
Do one more question if we have one.
So I work in finance. I've come from a very different background and a different country. I'm worried about the impact that a tech-based education or tech-centric education has on real deep thinking. I'm curious to know kind of how you've thought about kind of inculcating deeper thinking, more complex system thinking into kids as they're growing up, especially with shortening attention spans.
Yeah, so I'm actually pushing the opposite, but I'm going to get to what I'm worried about as well too. So we're pushing for a learning science focused education, right? That allows for human ingenuity and deep thinking, where we remove the drudgery, right, from the hands of people and allow them to actually engage. I would urge you to watch a series of amazing TED Talks by a guy named Andrew McAfee, who used to be an MIT economist, right? Who talks about this idea of the joys of coming for our jobs. And he talks very much about the fact that at every technological revolution, we've always maintained full employment. We always leave a population behind. And you're watching some of it happening right now in Ohio and places like that, where the industries are moving forward and folks are not moving as quickly, not being upskilled. So we're pushing very much the idea that to allow through the curriculum, the curiosity, the investigation, the conversation that needs to happen in education, that is really what learning is really all about, to go to the John Dewey methodologies, which exist, were healthy in schools like Synapse. I often argue, you go to the best private schools in America, John Dewey very much is alive and well. You go to the average public school system, Thorndike, the efficiency model, the factory model, very much alive. What I worry about is that in low-resource communities in countries, it will become tech-focused. The AI will be teaching, which I think is a scary proposition. It's never going to happen in a place like this, but it's going to happen in the south side of Chicago. It's going to happen in Haiti, in places like that. That's the worry, right? We're going to create perhaps a greater gap in that kind of human ingenuity. I have a colleague who says you cannot talk about emerging technologies without talking about human ingenuity. Remove the drudgery, allow people to think and play and explore and investigate. That's the true design of a curriculum, to really foster that kind of thinking. But when reading proficiency is the obsession in some places, you lose a lot in the education and curriculum. So I do worry about low resource countries. I go to this thing every year called the Education World Forum. It's in London. Imagine 150 ministers of education in one place. That's what they worry about, that jobs are going to be lost and the AI is going to be the one leading at the classrooms in those countries, and nobody wants that. But I fear it's going to happen in some places.
Good. That's it. We got to get you home. You all the places you travel. I'm exhausted.
No, it's good. It's all good.
Jeez.
I go to fun places. I'm getting a private tour of the Lego factory in Denmark in a few weeks. So that's fun place. I advise that.
Your kids aren't going there, right?
No,
tell them?
school's in session. Yeah. So I get to go to fun places too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, hey, thanks for coming.
Thank
It's
you.
Super great.
For being here. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Really appreciate it. Drive safe. That's it. Have a good night.